episode of Talking Marijuana. It is great to be here. We got a lot to talk about today in the marijuana universe. And we're your hosts. I'm Barry Kramer. I am the owner-operator of California Patients Alliance. It's a GLACA accredited dispensary here in the city of Los Angeles. And with me is...
Yamilet Bolaños. I am the patient operator for Pure Life Alternative Wellness Center on La Cienega, and I'm the president of GLACA, the mark of excellence in medical marijuana in the city of Los Angeles since 2006.
Awesome.
And with us on the phone...
Hello from Sacramento. This is Don Duncan. I'm the California Director of Americans for Safe Access, the nation's leading medical cannabis patients advocacy organization.
And also with us today is...
And I'm Dan Gabriel, comedian and guy who sits here and goes, what?
That's our Joe on the street. And our guest today is Sam Humid. He is the owner-operator of...
Perennial Holistic Wellness Center in Studio City. Thank you. Also a GLACA accredited dispensary.
Yes, we're all accredited up here at this table.
Absolutely. So let's dive right in. We've had a pretty busy week in the news and things that are happening around the country. Everything's kind of bubbling up. A couple weeks ago with the Sanjay Gupta announcement, and then with the U.S. attorneys coming out, we've gotten a lot of reaction to all of that. And one of the things that's going on is up in Washington State. You know, Washington and Colorado are legal states now for marijuana, but they haven't drawn up their regulations and how to operate with all that. But in Washington, they're getting closer and closer, and they. I was reading an article about their rules and the regulators, what they're going to be doing there in Washington, and it looks like that they're talking about limiting space for grows. They want to limit basically the amount of herb that's grown in Washington State so that there's just enough for the people that need it legally and medically, and not any excess that will be shipped over state lines. They're worried about that. They sought to keep big business out of their industry there by barring anyone from holding a stake in more than 3 stores or three growing and processing facilities. Now,
3?
I just want to put that in perspective a little bit, because if I had the opportunity to own one processing facility, that would be amazing. But the idea of having 3 in a state where there probably is only going to be less than maybe 20 or 30, that's pretty amazing to...
I thought that the rumor was that the cigarette companies already had fields ready to go so that they could start making cigarette versions of it.
Those are good rumors.
Didn't they patent names or something? I remember a long time ago.
A lot of that's just urban mythology. Those so-called patents have never turned up. The only patent we know about is the federal government has a patent on THC.
Right. Yeah. Lucky them.
I wonder what for. It's so useless and stuff.
Yeah, it's a dangerous drug, right?
Yeah, it's a dangerous drug. What is the United States federal government playing with it for?
Because they need it. So in proposing their limits, the regulators are seeking to balance, they have enough marijuana on hand for the, but not have too much that they would be competing with black market and medical marijuana industry. So I think in the next few years we're going to have an interesting push and pull into how to regulate this. I think there's a learning curve that I've now seen that local governments and our more national government really needs to kind of catch up with as to what, again, Don, what is mythology and what is real. And you want to legislate and make laws that are applicable to the real world situation and not some mythology that you think might happen or, is based on all of the disinformation.
Well, sure. You know, a lot of times we talk about stigma, and people think, oh, stigma is, that's just about, people being mean to cannabis smokers. But the truth is, stigma allows for discrimination, it allows for bad policy, and it hurts everyone. And so if we can get rid of all that whole, that fairy tale aspect of cannabis and deal with it as the real medicine it is, as a healthcare issue, then we're going to move forward on this.
Absolutely.
And that's what they should be dealing with in Washington State right now.
Yeah. Well, I hope that they come around to that.
Well, they have neighboring states, Idaho, for instance, the state troopers of Washington are constantly stopping people trafficking large amounts of marijuana out of Washington state into the neighboring states. So
Right.
they're trying to curb all of that, and it's a good thing to happen.
It is, and it's a good thing that they're thinking about it. But it seems to me odd that I think what they said was they're going to propose. They want to cap the amount of space in Washington available to grow recreational marijuana at 2 million square feet, the equivalent of about 35 football fields. So.
That's a sizable amount.
It's a sizable amount. It's a lot. I wonder how
For
they.
a whole state?
35 football fields.
35.
Yeah,
so
that-
figure you can sprinkle them around the state, and yeah.
Right.
That's a lot.
I mean, it
But
seems.
if you wanted to grow in your yard, you can't do that.
No.
No, you're not
No.
allowed.
No.
So I'm wondering where they came up with that figure of 2 million.
They
feet
clearly
to the-
didn't count me into that. I don't live in Washington, but if they counted me, I would smoke just the 2 million by myself. That's why they can't have that rule in California.
And then moving around the
Wouldn't take long
country.
either.
Moving around the country, we had some news out of New Jersey. Governor Christie's in the news again, and that is that the revisions that he had asked for have come through the assembly. So now they're going to continue this process, and hopefully they'll start getting medicine to actual people very shortly in
Right.
New Jersey. But Governor Christie wanted a couple of revisions. He wanted edibles to be allowed only for children. For sale only to children, and that a psychiatrist and a physician would have to sign off on that child in order for that child to be in the program.
So
Probably a
What's
good.
the
Adults
psychiatrist
cannot
going to do?
have
Figure
the-
out if they just want to get high?
I don't know what a psychiatrist is going to do for somebody who has
And a
autism
child.
that needs this
Right.
medicine. But if it seems kind of a painless.
Option to have to, or the thing that you have to do in order to qualify to receive medicine.
and Christie
yeah.
got it, and it does seem hypocritical.
People are
Correct.
going to start getting fake IDs that say they're 12.
12 years old. I need that
Now I
lollipop.
have a horrible affliction that makes me grow a beard.
I'll take a dozen lollipops. Yeah, it's an odd request that he had, because if it's medicine, it's medicine. This is the.
Right.
But
this
the
is a-
thing is that he doesn't think it's medicine. His statement last week was that
But if
there's
he doesn't
no
think
medical
it's
marijuana,
medicine-
it's only marijuana.
Right. So again, hypocritical. If he doesn't think it's medicine, why would he allow it to be given to children only? I mean, that child is always the one.
Yeah,
we're
that's
trying to
kinda
protect.
dumb, huh?
So he's just caught in a web of hypocrisy.
So the revisions that just went through, he asked for.
Yes.
Yes, well, he wouldn't sign.
And before edibles were available for everybody, or
No,
for not
because
at all?
I
the
think
law.
before they weren't allowed at all.
Yeah, there was the medical marijuana. Correct me if I'm wrong, Don. There was a medical marijuana regulations for that state that Christie inherited, and so he.
That's right. Yeah, he didn't.
And he
His
inherited,
basic
so
position was,
he
well,
was
I don't
out-
like this, but it's a law.
Yeah.
So,
And so he's
I guess
dragging
give him a
his
little
feet
credit for
and
that.
signing
dragging his
it.
feet. Yeah, that's what he was doing, dragging his feet.
So he's.
So he's all over the place on this issue, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I don't think he quite knows what to do with it.
Well, and again, this is what I'm kind of referring to in that there's a learning curve that people that have not been dealing with medical marijuana and marijuana issues for as long as the advocates in this industry have been doing it, they just don't understand the complexities. And as complex an organic herb that marijuana is, it has so many complexities in it itself. That is extended out to the whole issue of marijuana. There are so many complexities and ways to hurt people with legislation if you don't understand those complexities. And unfortunately, it really just takes time to educate people and to get them caught up. And as much as I feel like legislatures are coming on board and starting to deal with this issue, they're dealing with it in ways that are part of an old paradigm and not into how it really is, again, working in real world, in real time.
They're dipping their toe in
Right.
because they're all scared about any sort of backlash that they're going to get from their constituents.
Exactly.
And that's
Yeah,
especially
it's
what
crazy
Christie's
because
doing.
support for medical cannabis is way stronger than support for elected officials. So, they should really get over that.
Can we feed that to them somehow, that they can suck that up?
They should really be gluing themselves to this issue is so popular.
Yeah.
They should get themselves educated about this issue so that they can say correct things and not put their foot,
Luckily now they just have to
Your
watch
mouth.
1 hour-long special from Sanjay Gupta.
That's
Right.
true. It's all condensed information.
They made it so easy.
Yeah, even so, a couple weeks after that's been out, we're not getting great dialogue from the opposition.
No.
We have a dope of the week coming up in one of our later segments that will deal with that sort of blindness to what marijuana can do and the medical properties of marijuana and stuff like that. So our Attorney General puts out this great memo saying we're going to leave states alone that have proper regulatory systems in place. We're going to let the experiment go on. Mostly it was geared toward Colorado and Washington, but the message certainly is getting out to all the other states that have medical marijuana. And there were a number of articles this week that I came across that said that state attorney generals, state district attorneys are really not paying attention to the memo that the government
Oh my
just
God!
put out.
memo?
Not only paying attention,
Right.
the DOJ's in California are so like business as usual. We're not going to do this.
Right. So they're
So-
damn.
But California has dropped the ball as far as the regulations go. Washington, Colorado have very, very stringent regulations that they're trying to enforce.
Right.
California is still very willy-nilly.
Well, we're going to come back after we
sure
take a break in a second here, and we're going to talk about the regulatory process here in California because that is moving forward. But the response from our district attorneys, Melinda Haig, especially up in Northern California. Basically, she's the district attorney that's going after Harborside,
Yeah.
the very large, the largest dispensary in the country.
Is she a district attorney or
No,
She's a U.S.
prosecutor?
Yeah.
She's a U.S. prosecuting
Okay.
attorney. Yeah. So she's been going after Harborside, and the reason she went after Harborside was because they were too big.
that was
Just the
reason.
idea that
Yeah.
they were too big would lead possibly to misuses and illegalities. That was her assumption, but that's not a reason.
No.
That's totally not solid reasoning
No.
for going in and getting somebody. And specifically in this
doesn't enter
article,
into crime.
oh well. Anyway.
Well, you got to remember these organizations fight with budget bureaucracies year in, year out. If they don't spend all the money they had from the previous year in the following year, they get a budget reduction. So the easiest way for them to spend all of their money by the end of the year is to come after potheads. We're not going to fight back. We're very
Absolutely.
simple, peaceful people. We don't
Absolutely.
carry guns. We don't have hard drugs in our safes. Like, it's an easy way to blow $1 million on a raid of simple people that generates nothing, but it gets big
It's
news
true.
and it blows the budget.
So Melinda
You get to
Haig,
confiscate all that pot.
Right.
right, and
And all 3 pounds that they usually get at any particular store.
Part-time job with the DEA. Dan.
so the memo that you were asking about that came out about a week or two ago now, is it 2 weeks?
About 2 weeks.
About 2 weeks. It's a Cole memo, the Assistant Attorney General, Cole, and it says that instructs U.S. attorneys that in exercising prosecutorial discretion, prosecutors should not consider the size or commercial nature of a marijuana operation alone as a proxy for assessing whether marijuana trafficking implicates the department's enforcement priorities. And
a great
that's exactly what Melinda
Way to
Haig.
cite the source material. That's very authoritative.
And that, thanks. And that's what Melinda Haig is exactly doing. She has said, Harborside's big, and so we're going after him. And that's exactly what the government is saying not to do, although that memo is not it's not law.
Right.
She doesn't have to follow it. She can still use her own discretion. But she's just on the wrong path and stuck in the mud, and no matter how much is presented to her, she continues to
care.
go on this path. It's almost like an ego thing.
Yeah.
Northern California has a cultural...
It feels like a vendetta, doesn't it?
It does.
I can't say that
She
it is,
doesn't
but it
seem
feels
to
like
react
it.
to any real legitimacy or science or even her own bosses telling her that she's doing the wrong thing.
Harborside did amazing things. They brought this whole industry way out to the forefront. Everybody knows about medical marijuana because of Harborside.
Yeah.
The problem is that the 50s conservative generation that live on the East Coast that watch these Northern California, San Francisco type cultural hippies promote medical marijuana,
Correct.
There's a cultural gap between them.
That's
I
always
think
been
it
a
also
problem.
has a lot to do with East Coast weed is horrible.
Absolutely.
And they, of course they're against
Which
it.
is
And
why
I'm
we-
against
yeah.
horrible weed too. If that's all I could get, I wouldn't. I would have a problem with it too.
So we don't have a problem with East Coast weed flooding the West Coast market.
Yeah, no, I don't
No.
think that's going to happen
No.
It
really
was just
soon.
try West Coast weed. I think they'd come around.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's take a break. I want to come back and let's talk about what's going on here in California.
Yes.
It's big news, and we're trying to get things in order and
Understand
trying to
it.
move forward. So when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about California and what's happening here. We'll see you after the break.
Good deal.
Upcoming shows to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Welcome to FYI. It's Dimitri Young here with Robert Fick. Hey everybody, welcome to Talking Marijuana.
Hi, everybody. Crabman's Rock and Roll Revival featuring Frazier Smith is on the air, in your hair, and going out everywhere around the world.
I'm Gary Garver, live from the John Lovitz Comedy Club.
This is the John Lovitz Podcast Network.
Hi, John Lovitz here. It's time to put laughter back into your life. Check out the John Lovitz Comedy Club, located in the heart of Universal Studios City Walk, Los Angeles, not Orlando. For tickets, go to thejohnlovitzcomedyclub.com.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Podcast Network.
And welcome back to Talking Marijuana. We're talking about the issues of the day here in California. We're going to talk about California in just a second, but I wanted to bring up one little thing that's happening today in Washington. We have a hearing, a federal hearing where the DEA is being called in. Don, you want to tell us a little bit about what's going on there?
It's really quite remarkable. We've been asking for congressional oversight hearings of federal cannabis and medical cannabis activity for years, and finally, today, it's happening. Senator Patrick Leahy, he's from Vermont, a Democrat for Vermont, has called oversight hearings. He chairs the Judiciary Committee, and today we've got the Attorney General asked to come and talk to the committee about marijuana enforcement in states where it's either legal for non-medical or medical use. And so this is a big deal. You know, it's actually very unusual for the Congress whose president is sitting to call the administration in like this unless it's something very, very serious. And so it's sort of an evidence of this kind of momentum in Washington, D.C. that I feel like is building right now to harmonize federal law with state law. So it's actually going to be starting here in about an hour. Of course, you know, this isn't going out live, so that may not help folks. But we'll know by next week what happens at these hearings, what the impact is going to be, what the Attorney General has to say, what Eric Holder has to say about medical cannabis in California and the other states. And I think this recent Cole memo is probably a really good hint what that thing is.
What are your expectations?
I think the Attorney General is probably going to tell the Senate Judiciary Committee that they're not going to make it a priority to go in and mess with states where they're taking care of business, where they're regulating medical cannabis and they're enforcing their laws, and there's not a big problem. I think it's going to be a priority to enforce laws. We've got cannabis crossing state lines, lots of complaints coming from local people. You know, that's I feel like happened here in California is that we've been unregulated so long that there's frustration and complaints coming from the bottom up. So this federal crackdown may be coming from the top down, but its origins are at the bottom. The police departments and city councils and just community members who are just fed up and don't know where to go. So I hope what we're going to hear today is a reiteration of this Cole memo. I hope that's what we're going to hear is that the federal government really is going to give the states a little breathing room to regulate medical cannabis.
That would be good news for advocates and patients and recreational pot smokers in Colorado and Washington.
Now, Don, with that memo, what about a situation like Los Angeles where we have regulations in place? There are 135 stores that are allowed to exist, and there's still 1,000 stores. Is the DEA going to be allowed to come in and deal with that?
Yeah, that's a crazy situation. Of course, the feds are probably not really looking right now at the local scene. They're probably looking at state regulations. And so what I think California needs to figure out is what's going to be the relationship between state regulation and local regulation. Are we going to leave the onus on the cities and counties, or is the state going to pick up part of that burden? So I don't think we'll see much local stuff coming up in the hearings, except, of course, the wild anecdotes about crazy abuses that may or may not be true.
Yeah.
Right. Well, as we spoke last week, many of those abuses are caused by law enforcement and they're not wanting to let armored cars take the cash away from dispensaries. All the negative things that they've put onto the industry have created or helped to create a situation where crime can be more rampant, and they can point to it and go, look, there's crime that we created. So, so the judiciary hearings today do move us to our next topic, which is about California regulating marijuana, medical marijuana at this point. That's all that's legal here in California.
Well, cross your fingers. We're going to see what happens here in California. When last we talked about this topic, it was sort of a downer. I was telling you guys that basically every bill died this year. We couldn't get anything through both houses and committees, and we were really disappointed because there were at least two proposals that I thought were worthwhile. More than that, but two important ones. One that would have created a regulatory bureaucracy to come up with the rules in California, and the other one that just would have codified the Attorney General's guidelines from back in 2008. Our old Attorney General, who's now the governor, published some very useful guidelines on what's legal under state law back in 2008. So this would have just taken those guidelines and given them the force of law. Both of those bills died this year. They both were withdrawn for lack of support. They couldn't get enough votes to be adopted. And so we were really bummed out about that, frankly. And but we knew behind the scenes that Democratic leadership was really motivated to do something this year about medical cannabis, but they couldn't get the votes from the Democrats. And let's be clear what's happening in California. We are not having a situation where the Republicans are blocking medical cannabis regulation.
No.
It's Democrats. It's the moderate Democrats who will not line up behind this thing. So we got a break with this Cole memo. The Cole memo was published on in the end of August 29th, I believe, and it really put the wind back in the sails of efforts to regulate. And so what they did is they took those two bills behind closed doors and sort of combined them into an omnibus regulatory bill and brought it back. They actually dropped the bill. It dropped over the weekend. It was introduced on the floor yesterday on Monday. And what we have is a bill, AB 604. AB 604. The author is Tom Amiano, a medical cannabis champion from the San Francisco Bay Area in the State Assembly. We're actually expecting a second bill from the Senate President Pro Tem Darrell Steinberg that could drop at any time. Identical text. The idea is just to send a clear shot across that leadership in both houses are behind this bill. And what's really unusual, first of all, let me say what this is called. It's called a gut and amend bill. They basically took a bill that has already been approved in committees and is waiting for final approval on the floor, and they deleted all the existing language and stuck all this new language in. So it's kind of a funny process. Many people are surprised that's allowed, but that's how it happened. That's why it's coming 4 days before the end of the session.
It's a strategy more than anything.
It's a strategy more. Okay, I have a couple of questions, Don. I want to be able to say this so everybody understands what we're talking about, but I believe that in part of this bill, there's a part in there that talks about we're going to be under ABC, but that local law enforcement. ABC is alcohol beverage control, yeah, and it's statewide agency, right? So, but it says that we'll be under ABC, but that local law enforcement will be the ones that are in charge of us and taking care of us. So, what does that mean exactly? That ABC
well, taking care of is a funny phrase.
Well,
So the police. And I don't like that. I would prefer to see this in the Department of Health. But, we fought that battle all year long with the old, one of the bills that died. And we tried, and frankly, we just could not get the authors or the Democratic Party to get behind anyone except ABC.
Okay,
so,
but wait.
I'm prepared to accept that as an appropriate oversight. The good news is that the ABC has an internal incentive, at this point to do it, and that, part of their budget now is going to be linked to medical cannabis. And so I guess they have a little selfish interest to, not to clamp down too tightly on the program. Now, when it comes to local law enforcement, what they say in the bill is that the ABC obviously can't get around to every single medical cannabis facility, just like they can't get to every liquor store. And so they're talking about enforcement here the same way they do it with liquor stores. When there's a problem with a liquor store, you might get an ABC investigator going in there to check it out, or they might notify the local police department and say, hey, we got an issue here, and the local police department might deal with it. So it's sort of a hybrid effort. So this isn't a new thing. This is how they do retail liquor sales already. So
Okay, and I think
we're always going to have a relationship with our local law enforcement. So I don't think we're ever going to come to a point where the state sort of takes over local enforcement.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to ask is there's a part in there that says that you have to use armored cars to deliver your pot. Like you can't, no one can drive it around, only armored cars. Is that true?
The bill's breaking quickly, and I don't remember seeing that phrase in there. That seems like an odd one since the federal government's been leaning on armored car companies and telling them not to do that.
That's what I thought.
Well, I think they've been telling you not to pick up cash.
Said that the vehicle had, that if you were transporting medical cannabis, it couldn't be visible from the outside and it had to be accompanied by 2 people. I'll definitely go back and take a look. I don't see that armored car bit in there, but yeah, it may be that got added in at the 11th hour.
The other thing I wanted to ask was that there's a $5,000 fee. And and it's a fee. It's not a tax. It's not adding any taxes, which is wonderful. But there's nothing about how much more the fee could go up.
Yeah, no, and you're right. The fee may go up. What you're seeing in there right now is a provisional fee of $5,000 because this bill had the foresight to consider the existing medical marijuana facilities around the state. You know, there are a lot of facilities in California, the 50 regulated jurisdictions, cities and counties, that already have business licenses or permits or some other authorization from their local government to operate. And so what this bill says is these people are going to get grandfathered. As long as your local city or your county government, whoever regulates you, will agree that you're legal in that jurisdiction, you're going to get grandfathered. And so because they have to do that right now, the bill takes effect on January 1st of next year, they went ahead and assigned a fee. It's the only fee actually assigned in the law, and so we don't know what it's going to cost to administer the provisional registrations and get the program up and running. So frankly, somebody just picked up $5,000 and said, we're going to go with that, and then we'll see what the fee costs. Now, the good news for businesses that are medical cannabis otherwise in California is that our state law actually prohibits the state from using fees as a revenue-generating vehicle. They can't set fees that are high with hopes of pocketing the difference, basically. So all the fees established under this bill, just like all the fees established under every bill in California, will have to be justified by the cost of the program. So if they set fees and they wind up with extra money, which seems like it never happens, but if that's what happens, they have to lower the fees. See what I'm saying? So it's $5,000 up front because we had to start somewhere.
That's good. It feels like it doesn't happen anytime where the fees are lowered.
They'll find a way to spend the money.
Politicians are so damn corrupt that it obviously works its way into somebody's.
We don't like the fees. Remember, 2 years ago, we were talking about 5% extra sales tax. We were talking about sales tax reaching up to around 20% in some jurisdictions.
That's much better.
$5,000 one time isn't so bad.
No. So to backtrack just a little bit, we kind of jumped into some details about this regulation, but the regulation is kind of being fast-tracked because of the memo that was put out by the Attorney General's office, which said...
Here. You know what the Fed said is they may back off, and we've had a lot of federal interference in California, a lot of interference, a lot of intimidation.
Exactly.
And I think there's a new enthusiasm for this in Sacramento because people are thinking, good, let's get the feds out because, nobody really benefits when the federal government comes into California and starts messing with things, except maybe some law enforcement lobbyists who get paid for that. But otherwise, it's really not good news for the state or the cities or the counties. Speaking of the big picture, what this bill does is it copies programs that have been adopted in Colorado, Rhode Island, Washington, D.C. After Proposition 215 was adopted. And instead of trying to spell out the minutia of regulation in advance, it creates guidelines of what needs to be regulated, and then creates a division inside the Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control that's going to work with stakeholders, and it specifically authorizes them to work with government agencies and non-government agencies to figure out how to regulate medical cannabis. So they're going to leave in this. They're going to leave to local cities and counties the ability to do land use regulation, to determine where they can be located. But the other kinds of regulatory stuff the department would work on. Okay. One of the things I really like that I think has been overlooked in the bill so far is the provision in there that requires the new division to work with cities and counties to find the best solutions for local regulation. Because I think there are some cities and counties, especially in Southern California, that would adopt regulations if it wasn't their problem to figure out. If we can just say to them, hey, here's the model legislation from the state. So we might actually make some progress in spreading safe access with this regulatory bill, too.
That would be excellent.
Well, let's take a short break. We'll come back and talk a little bit more on the particulars and what might be going on down there today in the state legislature, and we'll see you when we come back from our break.
This is the John Lovitz Podcast Network.
Upcoming shows to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Welcome to FY. It's Dimitri Young here with Robert Fick. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Talking Marijuana.
Hi, everybody. Crabman's Rock and Roll Revival featuring Frazier Smith is on the air, in your hair, and going out everywhere around the world.
I'm Gary Garver, live from the John Lovitz Comedy Club.
This is the John Lovitz Podcast Network.
Hi, John Lovitz here. It's time to put laughter back into your life. Check out the John Lovitz Comedy Club, located in the heart of Universal Studios City Walk, Los Angeles, not Orlando. For tickets, go to thejohnlovitzcomedyclub.com.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Podcast Network.
Hey there, everybody. We are back with Talking Marijuana, and we're discussing basically California regulations at the moment. Today, down in our state legislature, they're talking about AB 604, which is a regulatory process for the state of California, and hopefully. If not this one, something very soon, because the Cole memo has pointed out that the federal government is going to stay out of states that have a working regulatory system, and we don't have that here in California, as many of the medical marijuana states don't have. So we really need to get on that, and it was a good boost to everybody to kind of get that going.
Hey, Don, I got a question for you. Basically, the dispensary operators, the dispensary operators are the people who are being regulated the most, because we've gone through and presented ourselves. We've given all the information. The government knows who we are. In this down economy, though, there's so many people that are trying to grow what they call medical grade cannabis in their houses, in their closets, or whatever else, that the product is so inferior that they're bringing it to stores like mine or Yami's or Barry's, and it has molds, it has mildews, it has residues, and we reject it. And then we see it come up online in other dispensaries' menus who aren't as diligent as we are.
Right, and that's one of the issues in regulation that hasn't been dealt with very much in California, because we've just been dealing with criminal justice issues. But quality control is a big deal, and the division does have the authority to consult with the Department of Health and the Department of Agriculture and deal with these sort of quality standards, especially around testing. And this bill covers any activity in California related to commercial medical cannabis provision. So that will be the cultivation, testing, distribution, transportation. So it's all under the purview of the new division. So you're right that dispensaries have had most of the attention so far because they're visible. But I think we're about to bring the whole of the industry of medical cannabis out of the shadows and into the sunlight, where it can be properly regulated and have transparency and integrity. Now, a word of caution for folks who are a little worried right now when they hear that this bill, AB 604, does not regulate medical marijuana patients or their primary caregivers. So if you're growing your own cannabis or someone's growing it for you, that's not regulated. That's not commercial activity. This is a bill that regulates the people in the business of medical cannabis. So if you're in the business of medical cannabis, or a business that is ancillary to medical cannabis, like testing, you'll be regulated by this bill. But if you're growing your own medicine, or your primary caregiver is growing your own medicine, that's not regulated.
But it's not regulated, but it's not illegal, because you're allowed as a patient to grow that.
Of course, right. Prop 215 is a voter initiative, and the state legislature can't change it. So under the California Constitution doesn't let them change Proposition 215. So you will always be allowed to grow your own medicine or designate a primary caregiver to grow it for you in California. That, unless the voters want to repeal Prop 215, and I don't see that happening.
I don't see that.
And so, I did get an email this morning of someone asking, what about the collectives and cooperatives? Because this bill replaces repeals language that created what we call the collective and cooperative defense. And the reason for that is because if they leave the collective and cooperative defense in California law under AB 604, nobody will register. They'll just say, well, I've got this other defense. I'm not going to bother registering. And so they have to pull that out so that all the commercial operators are compelled to participate in the regulatory framework.
Does that have some effect on the nonprofit status and whether or not you're...
that's actually an interesting term. This bill does not require nonprofit operation.
Or mutual benefit?
It requires that you be a nonprofit organization. Whether or not the lack of that requirement is an authorization, I think is something we'll probably be debating for a few years after the bill is adopted.
Are they? No
the
one's
courts have
talking
to
about
interpret
that?
things like that. Frankly, I don't care one way or the other, profit or nonprofit, as long as patients are getting their medicine. And I think there are pluses and minuses to both sides. The only reason that I think I tend to favor the nonprofit operation for medical cannabis is that I always want the interest of the patients to be guiding the organizations and not the interest of the shareholders. I don't think our for-profit healthcare system is done right by our communities, and so I worry about it.
Right.
But if the bill is later construed as to authorize for-profit operation, that's fine too, as long as we're getting medicine out to people who need it.
But you were saying that it's sort of modeled after Colorado, the states that came later. We were the first state to authorize medical marijuana, and so we have a lot of problems with our state laws. It's muddy, and this is it's been long overdue that we get them together and have real regulations.
That issue of nonprofit is a great example of muddy. Many people believe that the California law does not require nonprofit operation, and they have a valid argument. It's never been adjudicated in court, but many people would say that SB 420, the only existing legislation to try to implement Prop 215, they would say, well, that doesn't really require nonprofit operation. It just says that for-profit is not authorized, but it doesn't say you have to be nonprofit.
So no one's ever taken it to court.
We're splitting hairs, but I think this bill, if I were going to call it, if I were going to look in my crystal ball, I would say probably this bill will allow for-profit registration. Because there's nothing that forbids it, and so I would say a for-profit company could probably register under the bill, but lawyers are going to have to work that out later.
Yeah.
I have another question, darling, about this bill. Does it establish a regulatory control council of any kind? And if so, how do you get on that council?
The bill does not actually establish an advisory board for the division. They call it in the Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control. They have they're creating a new division. It's called the Division of Medical Cannabis Enforcement, and that division will be made up. They'll be chaired by a person appointed by the director of ABC, and then he'll have his staff sit on this staff the division and make these decisions. The law does authorize them to consult with stakeholders, but there's no actual formal body that will be advising the division. The reason they didn't do that is because it sort of lies outside the normal way that ABC works, and so they wanted this to work within their existing framework.
Right.
I would much prefer to see an advisory committee, and we lobbied for that heavily when the bill was these provisions from AB 473 were introduced, and frankly, we just couldn't get it. But I'll tell you, we were down to the 11th hour. We were hammering away for a stakeholder advisory committee, whether it was binding or non-binding, to influence this, because like we were saying before, Barry was mentioning, people outside the industry don't get it, and they don't know how this works. I would never try to write regulations for manufacturing cars because I don't know how. So, I think that I really do hope the division will listen to us.
But there's nothing compelling them to.
They're not compelled to, but the intent is pretty clear because there are two passages in the bill that authorize the division to get out and talk to people both in government and out of government about this. But it's not strictly speaking a requirement.
Well, it's definitely long overdue in California that we have statewide regulations that apply to everybody from Northern California down to San Diego, and at the moment we just don't. We know what a
Every
horrible...
state has their own thing going on.
Well,
or
it's
every
still...
city within the state.
And within
Every city
California,
within the
every city
state.
has its own
San
issue.
But
Diego's
other
no-
states, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think other states don't have the problem that California has, in that, again, we were the first to come on board. Our laws were sort of just very sloppily written or generously written to sort of allow for
Intentionally
lots of
written
things.
vaguely.
I say generous.
But
Open-ended, that's for
but
sure.
other states that have come on board have been certainly Colorado, Washington. Their models have been for-profit, and they've been from seed to sale. Regulation and oversight on marijuana, and that seemed always smarter. I know we have a lot of people here in California that are going to bitch and moan about being regulated, but there is no other system to exist in other than a regulatory system, because then you have protections.
You have protections.
And
Everybody
which we
knows where
don't
they
have
stand.
right now. We just
And
don't
we've
have
been
those
screaming
protections.
for regulation for years. I mean, we screamed at the LA City Council and now the state. We need regulation.
I mean, if we flash back,
Literally, right?
if we flash back to Prohibition days, prior to alcohol being controlled, people were going blind from moonshine.
Absolutely.
And then now you can go to any liquor store and know that you're going to buy something off the shelf. It's safe. You can drink it. You'll get drunk, but you're not going to die or go blind.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Marijuana needs that same sort of regulation.
Exactly.
And it's like Governor Christie
and, you
never
know-
watches Boardwalk Empire.
It's from his own
Right?
state.
It's not as if cannabis is going to be bought and sold in California and never be regulated. And you know, we dealt with this in the old days with dispensary regulations. And there was definitely a part of our community that said, no, don't regulate the dispensaries. They shouldn't
Right.
be regulated.
Right.
Well, the fact is they were going to be regulated. And I'll point out that of those cities that jumped up and regulated early, San Francisco, Oakland, Sebastopol,
West
Berkeley,
Hollywood.
West Hollywood, Palm Springs, their dispensaries are safe and stable.
Absolutely.
And not that they
Running.
never face federal pressure. They do, of course. But compared to places like Fresno or even Los Angeles
Yeah.
or San Diego, they're really not facing that kind of pressure. So regulations preserve access for patients, and that's really what we need. We need to preserve access.
Yeah, we really do.
How do we preserve safe medicine? We got safe access. I'm more concerned about preserving safe medicine. How do we bring the patient up to understand that there's different kinds of marijuana, there's different qualities of marijuana? Everything's you got to find a reputable
When somebody
distributor.
comes in to start checking every dispensary's the marijuana that they have there, maybe we could get like a letter grade on the outside window,
Yeah,
just like
that would-
restaurants
Yeah,
have.
yeah, that
Like
would
if
be
you're,
awesome.
if you're selling
Yeah.
moldy weed, then you get a D on your
Oh, no,
window.
that's a great idea because, you know, we've
I think
always...
if you're selling
that's a
moldy
great
weed,
idea.
you should close.
Yeah, you should close. What if you don't know?
Patient ignorance is rampant. That's the problem.
Yeah,
Patients
that's-
just don't know. All of a sudden, they have
They
this
don't
ability to
know.
go shopping in a store to buy anything that they want, and poorly run businesses
Right.
run by shady operators are just selling whatever they can get their hands on.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Or not giving proper instructions or proper information about the strains that they're providing. I had a patient walk in the other day, was telling me the story. I said when you eat an edible, you whatever, right? And talked to her for about half an hour, and at the end she was like, I can't believe I've been visiting dispensaries throughout the city. This is the first time that someone gave me some instruction. I understand why I wasn't feeling well now. I was not doing the proper thing. So yeah, there's a lot of misinformation or no information at all out there. And
It's like a doctor throwing pills at you without checking what
Yeah,
you need
exactly.
first.
It's true. It's true. But that's part of what GLACA has done in our small way here in Los Angeles. We rarely talk about the organization that we're all part of here, even though we tout that we're members of it. But GLACA, the Greater Los Angeles Collectives Alliance, has self-regulated their shops, the shops that are connected with that organization. They have a list of rules, protocols that are followed, and have always done that. You can't be a GLACA club if you're not following those regulations. And so to extend that, part of what GLACA does is to try to educate our own patients. It is difficult there is no central area where patients are looking for information. They really are getting it from the people they deal with every day on day-to-day basis. And so operators need to, like Yami just explained, talk about their medicines with their patients. It's not just, hi, this is what I want, get it, and you're out the door. I mean, that can happen certainly for established patients and people that know what they're looking for. But many people that come into my establishment are new to medical marijuana. The Sanjay Gupta announcement or apology a couple of weeks ago, and that CNN special, they were seen by a lot of people. And in the weeks since, I have had many new patients sign up in our dispensary that have never dealt with medical marijuana on any level. They don't even smoke cigarettes. So the idea of smoking and getting the medicine by smoking it's almost it's not an option for them because I don't know how many of you have tried to smoke cigarettes that don't smoke, but you cough a lot. You can't get it down. It's not an easy thing to do till you know it. So they need to know options. They need to know what those options contain. Your edibles, your pills, other ways of being able to get this medicine, and the regulatory process is what will help put us all on the same playing field, and of course then it takes responsible operators to get this education out to people. But unfortunately, Sam, we don't have a central education location where patients can find out about all of this.
Right. We have an Oaksterdam University that teaches people how to manage dispensaries and grow to a certain degree. We have a number of magazines that constantly misrepresent what strains are.
Absolutely.
The NC Directory in Pasadena as well.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest magazines in Los Angeles has a poster where they have Bubba Kush, I think, listed as a sativa. Clearly, it's purely an indica. It's supposed to bring you down, make you relax. And they list it as a sativa. So do a number of websites online. So people are being misinformed even by the leaders in the industry.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the names just get changed just so that
to protect
or just to be fun about it.
Right.
You know,
and again, I think regulation, something that takes you from seed to sale, really helps to diminish those kinds of abuses and wrong-headed ways of thinking. I don't think you can ever get rid of them. Just like in any other industry, you can't get rid of the small percentage of people that don't do things by the regulations.
The marijuana industry has lived in the darkness for 50, 60, 70 years now with huge implications for getting involved in it. And to age out of that culture, we need a whole new group of people. Like in Arizona, for instance, high school students can leave at the end of the day and go learn how to grow medical marijuana. High school students.
Really?
It's part of their training.
Really?
Yeah.
In Arizona.
In Arizona.
Brewer.
In Arizona, really?
Absolutely.
But if they look Mexican, they might get pulled over.
They may not make it to the class.
If you're Latino, you can't do it.
Hey, we're going to take another break here. Okay. Come back, finish up our conversation today. It's pretty lively, so we'll see you on the other side of the break. Thanks for tuning in.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Upcoming shows to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Welcome to FY. It's Dimitri Young here with Robert Fick. Hey, everybody, welcome to Talking Marijuana.
Hi, everybody. Crabman's Rock and Roll Revival featuring Frazier Smith is on the air, in your hair, and going out everywhere around the world.
I'm Gary Garver, live from the John Lovitz Comedy Club.
This is the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Hi, John Lovitz here. It's time to put laughter back into your life. Check out the John Lovitz Comedy Club, located in the heart of Universal Studios City Walk, Los Angeles, not Orlando. For tickets, go to thejohnlovitzcomedyclub.com.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
And welcome back. We are back with Talking Marijuana, and our guest today is Sam Humid of Perennial Holistic
Wellness Center.
Wellness Center. You have a long name.
Yeah.
Ours is long too, and actually it's our email address. Stupidly made our email address our entire name of our dispensary, which really, whenever you're trying to type it out, is just so horrible. But
yeah, I mean, the best thing about my company, thank you. The best thing about my company name is we have a standard now that if you can't read it or pronounce it, you shouldn't shop there. Because my company name is Perennial Holistic Wellness Center, and first day of opening, a lady walks into my shop and says, "What is the Prenatal Holocaust Welcome Center?" And I'm like, "What did you call my store?" And I'm like, "No, it's Perennial Holistic." She's like, "Oh, I don't get it."
Let's take you on a tour.
Perennial Holocaust. Duh.
Forever and ever. So you're working on another project.
Yeah, I started.
Talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I started a media project called Cannabinews. It's cannabis. Take the S off, replace it with news. It's coming on its 1 year anniversary, actually. End of this month will be 1 year since I started the Cannabinews. It's it's on to a rocky start thus far, but we have a lot of interviews online. You go to youtube.com/cannabinews. And we have interviews with scientists. We have our lead scientist breaks down cannabis from THC to CBD and how it works and how it fights cancers. We have a really important segment about K2, synthetic marijuana, which a lot of people who have illegal marijuana in their states are going to.
You're talking about
spice.
Yeah.
Spice. I've tried that. It gets you crazy dizzy.
awful.
You've
and then you
tried
wake
that?
up in the middle of the night.
Why did you try
I
to
was
do
on
that?
I was working on a ship, and I hadn't
ship?
smoked weed in like a week.
And some
somebody
kid
was
had-
like, "Hey," so somebody was like, "You want to try this spice stuff?"
It can
and I
kill
tried
you.
it. It gets you crazy dizzy. It's nothing like the marijuana
It's a hallucinogenic
at all.
methamphetamine.
You get spun out,
Yeah.
and then you wake up, and then you pass out, and then you wake up like 2 hours later and cannot get back to sleep at all.
Right. Basically, synthetic marijuana is spices that are smokable that have been sprayed with a drug called JW18 or JWH18, and that drug is what gets you the high.
It's bad stuff.
It's
So I
terrible.
know we're kind of moving away from this subject here, but
All right.
with it, I know I have a question about it because if it's like a methamphetamine,
It's hallucinogenic methamphetamine.
so why
Wow.
is it sort of always mentioned as a pot substitute?
Because it looks like
Well, 'cause
pot. It looks like
I've never
potpourri.
seen it even,
It
so-
looks like potpourri. It's green and it just looks a little bit
Herbal.
herbal.
So they-
Looks like potpourri.
but more rightly, it should be equated to
Methamphetamine. It causes heart attacks in teenagers. We've had lots of kids die all around the globe from smoking the stuff.
Yeah,
it's
no,
awful,
I hear
awful
all the
stuff.
stories. I've stayed away from
I
it.
only
because
tried it
I'm happy
because
with
it was
legal
presented
medical
to me as a
marijuana.
weed substitute, but it is
It's not a substitute.
at all.
It's the same thing.
One
Like
nice thing-
cocaine's a weed
yeah,
substitute.
one nice thing
It's
about
not.
the
Banging
country.
your face against the wall.
Right. One nice thing about the country moving forward, like our Justice Department today and the Justice Department in the recent weeks, is that we're lucky in our state of California and the other 19 states that are legal. People do have access to real marijuana and
Right.
don't have to experiment or try to get that buzz
Right.
through other forms. But in all the other states, spice and those things are huge problems.
Rampant.
Simply because they don't have access to.
And also, like the kids on the crew on the ship smoke this because they can still pass a drug test the next day. I mean, they're
Yeah,
basically
but
doing
that's
meth
dangerous.
instead of pot so that they can pass a drug test.
Sometimes we live in such an absurd world that
Right.
it is hard to grasp the
Right, absolutely.
So this project is going well for you.
It's doing
a
pretty
year
good.
You've been doing it.
It's a year I've been doing it. We have probably like 15 episodes of interviews and things online. We had another 10 that we've shot. We're doing it in Spanish now too on Canamundo.
Oh, that's fantastic.
With our lead
Canamundo?
Canamundo, yeah.
with our lead show Los Marihuaneros, the pot smokers.
Yeah,
It's a lot of fun.
We
That's
figured out
fine.
the translation. Really? Is that what that means?
I don't know much Spanish. I don't know much, but that one I can figure.
I think that it's a really great thing that you're doing the Canamundo, because I think that my people are the ones
Women?
that, no, Latinos, Hispanics. Yeah, anyway, are the ones that need to be educated the most. And so it's
why?
why? Because if you're south of the border, you don't want to be okay. Let me start all over
The
again.
connotations
There's
of
a
marijuana.
stigma.
Yes, the
There's a
connotation. There's a stigma, and back in the day when what's his name?
Randolph Hearst?
Yeah, was trying to get rid of marijuana. He stuck it with the
blamed
illegal
it on the
aliens.
Mexicans and the blacks.
He blamed it on the illegal aliens coming across the border with all this pot on them. That was one of the arguments that he had.
Yeah.
So I'm from Costa Rica, so anyone south of Mexico doesn't want to be a Mexican that's bringing pot or that's into pot because it's a huge negative connotation. It is. And so, to bring a service like that in Spanish where you're educating, the Spanish masses, I thank you. My people thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. I'm glad to
My
bring
people,
it.
thank you. Jews are definitely
On board.
They are on
Yeah.
board.
Oh my God, I know.
I don't have a hell to worry about.
That's really true. You know, I have the strictest of my Jewish patients will come in Friday to pick up, a candy bar or something because they, of course, can't ignite anything on Saturday.
Right, for the
so,
Shabbos.
yeah. So.
Oh, that's right. Well, they can't even really open the package of candy bars, so they'll probably have to do that Friday afternoon before the sun goes down.
Dope of the week you were going to talk about.
Oh, yeah, dope of the week.
We have our continuing segment, Dope of the Week, and today it's David Frum. Many of you might know who he is. He's I'd say a bobblehead on TV. He's one of the what do they call just pundits? He's a pundit, and he is working with an organization that one of the Kennedys, Patrick Kennedy, is working with, and a number of other sort of well-known politicians and
that are against medical marijuana.
Don, did we lose you? No, you're still.
Nope, I'm still here.
Okay, so his name is Sabet. Do you know the guy Sabet, Don? Kevin Sabet.
Kevin Sabet. He's the Ann Coulter of marijuana.
He's the senior advisor, the former senior advisor on drug control policy under Obama.
He's a bozo. This guy is on a crusade against drugs, and he's fixated on marijuana.
And so these crusaders, they're constantly in the news because they have some clout with the people that are there. David Frum is a well-respected pundit.
He gets tax money.
And they've set up this organization called, I think it's called SAM, Smart Approaches to Marijuana, which is basically no approach to marijuana.
Why would they name a marijuana organization after me?
But
they clearly have no idea how much I smoke.
So the reason that David Frum is getting the Dope of the Week award this week is that he made a statement. I'm trying to find the statement. Sorry here. To understand, it's important to the referendum of marijuana. Sorry, everybody. I lost my place on that. I wish I had like a highlighter
dope of the week, huh?
I'm not the dope of the week. Get out of here.
Person, Rancho Cucamonga on September 23rd. We're protesting outside their conference. So, plan a trip down to Southern California. It'll be nice and hot that day.
Beautiful.
What's the protest about? Tell our audience again. Oh, here we go.
These marijuana crusaders, Kevin Sabet and his people, are all going to be down in Rancho Cucamonga in Southern California on September 23rd for an anti-marijuana conference. So come protest with us.
So we should have a pro-marijuana protest.
We are. There is a big, huge pro-marijuana protest right across the street. It's being organized by Lanny.
On the plaza in front of their conference. It's awesome. Okay. It's right outside the front door. They won't miss us.
Yeah,
so we've been talking about education and how important that is. And the reason I nominate this guy for Dope of the Week is because here's the statement that he made. He says, to understand where the medical marijuana debate is going, it's important to appreciate that medical marijuana is a laughable fiction. So in 2013, for an intelligent man to say that medical marijuana is a laughable fiction, and the reason he gives is because, there are places that allow people that aren't medical patients into their dispensaries. Well, there's liquor stores that sell. There's liquor stores that sell liquor to people that are underage. I mean, there are always going to be people that abuse a system. But to say that patients, in light of all of the research, in light of Sanjay Gupta's backtracking, understanding that there are actual physical human beings that are gaining quality of life through this medicine, and then to say it's a laughable fiction, I feel like their organization has, basically blown their wad and shown that they're not educated, not understanding. They just have an agenda, and that's all they really want to do.
They're anti-marijuana, period. They don't care.
So Dope of the Week on those guys.
Yes, Dope of the Week. Yeah.
Really, it's retarded. I keep using that word, and I want to apologize for using that word. It comes out in an instinctive way, and I apologize for using it. That's a horrible.
The reality of it is that we're missing semantics. He's anti-medical marijuana because marijuana has medicinal value, but without full oversight of protection of the plant and getting quality product, there isn't really a medical marijuana plant. And it's a plant that has medicinal
So that's
value.
what you're saying. That's what he's saying.
Yeah, but he's using it out of context completely.
He's totally using
but I
it
totally
out of
understand where he's coming from. Their medical marijuana the plant itself has medical properties. However, to call it a medicine in and of itself without an oversight committee saying, hey, you know what, this is actually really good for you for X, Y, and Z.
I find
We have that gray area still.
I find that advocates of marijuana will cop to the fact that there can be abuses of marijuana.
Absolutely.
Whereas advocates of, or non-advocates of marijuana will never cop to the fact that
There's
is
anything
a benefit
positive
Dummies, yeah.
coming from it.
that they feel somehow they lose their ground, and it's not. There's a happy medium where we can all come together and be adults and say, this is really the situation. Now let's,
An interesting test, find out how many pharmaceutical companies are in those people's investment portfolios.
Oh, yeah.
That would be the number one clue. Because you watch people in the news all the time. I used to take 25, 30 pills a day. Now I smoke 3 or 4 joints and these 3 pills and I'm great. Those 25 pills that we're paying for as taxpayers are $10, $15, $20 a piece.
Yeah.
The pharmaceutical companies are losing lots of money.
Yeah.
The investors are going to be losing lots of
And the
money.
pharmaceutical companies have no way of replicating the benefits of marijuana no way of synthesizing it and making it. I mean, have you tried the pills?
Yes, they don't work.
They don't work at all.
Nothing.
Man
They've
can't
never-
recreate what grows out of the
There's so
ground.
many compounds and micro compounds in cannabis that you can't synthesize all of them together into one thing. You have to use the plant whole to get the full benefit.
Exactly. There's a synergy as well. It's not a take it apart thing.
Absolutely. It works together in a complex way, and the attack has to be complex on it, not just this is no good or this is good, one way or the other.
Right.
Either one doesn't really work. You have to really look at the full situation, get as much education as you can, which has sort of been our theme this week for our show, education. We are at the close of our show.
We should all we should make it a point for everybody to find the Cannabis News and the CNN report that Sanjay Gupta did and email it around and tweet it and
Tweet
put
it
on
out, get it
Facebook.
out to your social
Make sure
networks.
everybody you know can see it and can see some real proof.
There's a lot of good information out there.
Education will change this industry. So
Absolutely.
that's our show for this week. Thanks so much. Thank you, Sam, for coming in. And
Thank you for
visiting
having
with
me
us.
again. It's a pleasure.
And Don, thanks for talking to us from Sacramento. Now go out there and
No
finish
worries.
the
Stay
good
tuned
work.
for news. I'm on my way to the Capitol next.
Let us
Good luck,
know as soon
Don.
as you hear anything.
Thank you, everybody out there. And
Pura vida.
Pura vida.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Podcast Network.
Upcoming shows to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Welcome to FY. It's Dimitri Young here with Robert Fick. Hey, everybody, welcome to Talking Marijuana.
Hi, everybody. Crabman's Rock and Roll Revival featuring Frazier Smith is on the air, in your hair, and going out everywhere around the world.
I'm Gary Garver, live from the John Lovitz Comedy Club.
This is the John Lovitz Podcast Network.